Bruchim Aboyim, thank you very much for coming and attending. Again, this is the second part of our lecture. This is on the fifth portion of the Torah, the Deuteronomy, Devarim. We are on the fourth Sedra, the Sedra of Reeh, and this is the second lecture on that Sedra, on that portion. We are up to chapter 11, verse 29, and again we're going by verse, word by word. Again, the Sedra had begun with the idea of God put before us a bracha and a klala. Re'eh, it says see. Just to reiterate, it's very important. Why a bracha and a klala with nothing in between? Because in life, something is either a blessing or a curse. There is no middle ground. Much like, again, a car you can put in park, but in a boat, again, Mayim is always alluded to with Torah, water. When you are on the water, there's only two gears, a forward gear and a reverse gear. If you put your boat in neutral, the boat will go back to shore, backwards, and so too in life. If something is not a blessing, then it's a curse. Then you've done something incorrect. So Moshe Rabbeinu again is talking to the people again in this whole book, the fifth book of the Torah, 36 days before he is about to pass away. In verse 29, we start with It'll be when the Lord your God bring you to the land that you are about to possess. And you'll give the blessing al har Grizim, Ba'klala, and the curse al har Abel, on these two mountains, har Grizim, mountain of Grizim, and the mountain of Abel. Rashi here tells us it means towards the mountain of Grizim, and that they turned their faces. It began with the blessing. Again, these were the Kohanim and Leviim and between them. And it began with the blessing, blessed be the man that makes not a graven image. And then it continues and it says, they said the blessing first, and then afterwards they turned their faces toward Mount Abel and began with the curses. What this tells us is basically, which is very important in life, there are consequences for actions. If you do something that's positive, there are positive results. If you do something negative, there are negative results. That's life. Now in Yeshua 8:33 it states there, al mul har Grizim, facing the mountain. It does not say al, on the mountain. From this, the Double Azata learns out that they were not on top of the mountain, but they stood at the bottom of the mountain, for each of these mountains. It continues in verse number 30. Elohema be'ever ayardei machrei derech mo'ashemesh. Have they not found these mountains beyond the Jordan, on the other side, means in Israel proper, behind the way of the going of the sun? Now, if you take the last letter of Halo Hema be'emer aver hayardei, spells the name Aaron, Moshe's brother. So this teaches us, one, that it's a commandment, a positive deed that brings atonement. Just like Aaron, the high priest. In addition, after the death of Aaron, the nation of Israel lost the clouds which led them, again, that were there in his merit. They now needed to rely on landmarks to lead them. And that is why the Torah mentions locations, which it didn't before, again, because it was the clouds that directed them on their journey. This is Be'eretz HaKanani, Ayosh Ba'arava, the land of the Canaanites that live on Arava, Mol HaGilgal Eitz Olem Moreh, opposite Gilgal, in the plains of Moreh. Now, Elam Moreh says here, again, that Shechem, again, which they call Nablus today. It's very interesting, I find, that these names are still the same names. I mean, we're talking about, over 3,500 years ago. And yet, they're still the same. Nothing has changed. It's interesting, as an aside, there's only three places of major contention. Why is it that, the Palestinians make a big deal out of the fact that it's their land? Why isn't it? After all, we in the United States took the land from the Indians, and we say it's our land. We conquered it. Well, guess what? Israel was conquered by many people. Why is it still our land? And the answer given, it's the word dam and damim, blood and money. If you can't buy something with money, then you cannot take it with blood. The land of Israel, according to God, our leader, has told us that we cannot sell the land of Israel. The only places in Israel that were bought with money were Jerusalem, Shechem, again Jerusalem by David, Shechem by Yaakov, and Hebron by Avraham Avinu at the Machpelah. These three places have been contended, and because again, if they were bought with money, then they can be acquired through blood. As far as the rest of Israel, no. And it continues in verse 31, and because you're now crossing over the Jordan, Rashi says the miracles of the Jordan shall be a sign for your hands. Shetavo Rishusa, or that you will become and inherit the land. So what are these words telling us? These words are extra. They tell us that the Jordan would be split in two, just like the Red Sea when the Jews left Egypt, so too when they entered the land. Of course, there's a difference in the miracle based on a Sforno. When the Jews left Egypt, we know that there were 12 different roads, so to speak, through the Red Sea that the Jews walked through. When they crossed the Jordan, what happened was that the water stopped flowing, and it built up like a wall. Now, the reason for I'm mentioning this is that when that wall that went miles in the sky, as it was piling up, when it came down, it would have been a tsunami. So the fact that God brought it down in a gentle way that did not destroy the land, again, was a double miracle. One, that he stopped the flow, and secondly, that he brought it down, again, with a nachas ruach, with gentility. And it says again that you're coming to the land which you're about to inherit, and which God is no saying given to you, v'yireshtem oso v'yishavtem bo, and you shall possess it, and you shall dwell within it. Verse 32 ends this chapter 11. Ushmartem lasos is called achukim es hamishpatim, and you should be careful to observe as all of the statutes and all of the civil laws, the ordinances, which I have given before you this day. That seems simple, but there's a lot going on here. It says ushmartem lasos. I've mentioned before the word shamar means to guard, but it also means to anticipate. We know that when Yaakov heard the dream of Yosef, his brothers were angry at him, but his father, Rashi says, Yaakov shamar es hadavar. His father guarded it, which means he waited with anticipation for it to happen. He saw it as a prophecy of sorts. So Shmartem, again, with Shabbos, we look forward to Shabbos, not just to guard Shabbos, but looking forward to it. So that's thought. Lasos is action. So our thoughts are about serving God need to be connected to an action, much like sports. It's important to swing and all the things that we use something like that for, but it's more important than the swing is the follow-through. If your follow-through is not correct, your swing will not be good. Also, the Torah mentions here, es hachukim, es hamishpatim, the statutes and the laws. Now, the statutes are laws that make no sense. They have no logic to them. And they're mentioned before the civil laws, which are very logical, to say to us that we serve God not because we agree with the logic. We serve God because He is our King. And whether we understand or not, what anything that God commands us is what's called Ratzon Hashem, the will of God, the will of a king. And whatever a king orders, everything has the same basis. Therefore, there's no such thing as a big mitzvah or a small mitzvah, a big sin or a small sin. Everything is the will of God and has the same weight to it, based on a base Mordechai. Now, according to Sifri, the word chukim refers to the midrashim, and the word mishpatim refers to judgments and litigation involving money, based on Aksav Kabbalah. Then it says, Asher Anochi Nosein Lefnechem, which I, meaning God Almighty Himself. The word Nosein is present tense. Nosein Hatara is constantly giving it to us. It's not a one-shot deal. It's not that God gave it to us some 3,000 plus years ago. No. It's a constant giving from a king, our Father in heaven. And again, Lefneim before us, Hayom, this day, that each day should be special. Each day we should see it as we just received it. You know, when a child gets a new toy, That's all he wants to play with. That's what's exciting. We should see it the same way. And with that, we have finished off chapter 11. Now we'll begin chapter 12. So again, Elah chukim hamishpatim asher tishmeron. These are the statutes and laws which you shall guard. Again, we said anticipate, la'asos ba'aretz, to do in the land. Again, same thing. We see again this idea of chukim, the statutes before the civil laws, even though they don't make sense and we don't know why. Again, it shows that we follow God, not because it's logical, not because it's good for us, not because we agree, only because it's the will of God. And He understands better than we do, but it's important for us to not. And it says, again, to do in the land what God has given to the Lord of your forefathers, to you for inheritance, all the days that you are alive on the earth. Now, we have two different statements here. One, lasos ba'aretz, that you should do them in the land, and then the verse finishes off with the words, al ha'adama, on the earth. So we have land and earth. Why the two different statements? They seem to be contradictory. So this refers to the laws that only apply, ba'aretz, usually is again, land means Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, while the end refers to all the rest of the laws, ha'adama, which apply everywhere and anywhere, and at all times that there's a Jew there. So what we call lasos ha'aretz, to do in the land, these are called chovos ha'aretz. These are obligation connected to the land, and adam are called chovos haguf. These are a responsibility and obligation to the body. It makes no difference where you are on earth. Now, what does that mean? For example, in the land of Israel, the laws of Shemitah, of letting the land stay fallow on the 7th year, sabbatical year, still exists. But outside of Eretz Yisrael, we do not keep Shemitah. It's something only for the land. On the other hand, wherever a Jew is in the world, he still has an obligation to wear tzitzit. He still has an obligation to put on tefillin. He still has an obligation to pray, even the Shabbat. So these are al ha'adama. Now, the word adama implies the kind of earth which is so inert that it does not respond to any of the influences in nature which produce growth or motion of any kind. Therefore, the people who have received the Torah, who are forced or chosen to reside in countries other than Eretz Yisrael, and who are therefore prevented from fulfilling the mitzvos which can only be fulfilled in the land of Israel, are described as living in a land called Adama, just earth, rather than Eretz, land, to indicate that the earth that they dwell on does not offer the opportunities for their spiritual growth offered by the earth, ha'aretz, in the land of Israel, based on Aksav, Kabbalah. We see the Torah is very medactic, very precise in the words that it uses, and it teaches us something. You know, my brother-in-law was may he rest in peace, was a very big lawyer in Philadelphia. He represented Larry King, went against, again, all these drug companies, on and on. I remember talking to him once, and I said to him, of course you read. I mean, lawyers have a lot to read. And he looked at me and very seriously said, no, of course I don't speedily read. I make my cases on words. Again, that's the Torah. We make our cases on words. Continues in verse number 2. And it says, Abei tabdun is called hamakonisha avrusham hagoyim, and you shall destroy all the places where the nations have served, again, idols. Asher atem yorshim osam, where you'll dispose of them as lokeham, their gods. Al hahorim haromim, the high mountains, vagvos, and on the hills. V'tachel called eitz ranan, under any leafy tree. Rashi tells us, Abei v'yachakak tabdun, destroy again and again. That means completely destroy them by the double term. Hence, we derive that if one destroys an idol, then again, if we're talking about like a tree, you must remove its roots after it. Again, so it refers to a tree that was cut down, no matter how many times. But if you take out the roots, again, the tree is not going to grow, and that becomes the thing. You just don't cut it; you remove it. And it talks about all the makomos, all the places where they're served, and what shall you destroy of them? They're gods that are on the mountains. We do not destroy nature. in the sense of taking down mountains. Again, they serve the mountains, they serve the stars in the sky and the moon and the sun, things that we can't even get to. Again, that's what we destroy is the idols that they make for them to serve them. And it continues in verse number 3. And it says, "V'nitzatatem es mesachosem v'shibartem es matzoseim," and you should break down their altars, and you should break up into pieces their pillars. V'ashreim tisum ba'esh, and their ashreim is their asherah trees. There was a tree that was planted that was called an asherah. The asherah, again, was an idol. Somehow, some way that they worshipped. Again, that should be burnt in fire. V'sili alhem tekadem, and the graven images of their gods you shall hew down. And you shall destroy, completely destroy their name from that place. Now Rashi says, how do you destroy their name? By calling them by nicknames, derogatory names. Now, in fact, not only that, the commentary Ksavik Abel tell us that it's a mitzvah, actually, to rename the site after it has been cleansed of its original character. So once you remove the idols and they're named after an idol, we remove the name as well. Now, the Rambam, Maimonides, learns from this that we're only obligated to seek and destroy houses of worship, idol worship, in the land of Israel, not in other countries. So we don't have to go around. Again, there's a debate, but we don't have to go to India or whatever. We don't have to go into the eastern countries and take down all of their Buddhas and whatever. It's not our job. In Eretz Yisrael, yes, there is an obligation to. And it continues in verse number 4. Lo sasu kein l'Hashem Elokechem. But we should not do the same to our God. What does that mean? Rashi said to sacrifice to heaven in any place. We should do it only in the place which God shall choose. Another interpretation is that is a forewarning against obliterating the divine name of God and against removing a stone from the altar in the temple and from the court. Rabbi Shmuel says, would it enter your mind that the Jews would break down altars? However, you should not do things like they're doing. Least you bring iniquities about it, and the sanctuary of your fathers will be destroyed. So again, important for us to follow the proper path. So again, when it says, you should not do such, it means not to serve God out of rote or obligation, but out of love and reverence based on the Kutzka. Now, their opinions forbidden, again, to I mentioned before, to erase the name of God. There are 7 names of God that we do not erase. And again, this is a Torah prohibition, Bereis and Rechaya. Now, nation of Israel might think that just as the nation served idols from many locations, such as mountains, that God only wanted Klal Yisrael, God was telling them that He only wanted the nation to serve Him at the site of the temple, not anywhere. Again, we do pray anywhere that we are, but as far as bringing sacrifices to truly serve God in that way, it would only be at the temple. Now, this was not a command to wage war against God, but rather a promise that even though they would destroy all the idols in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, it would not cause them to become callous towards God's holy places or to treat God in an irreverent fashion. Again, based on a Parsha Odyssey. Also, that's not. It's also, we know that the place. It's the next verse. Verse number 5. Where do we serve God? Kiem el hamokom asher yivkar Hashem Elokechem mikol shiftechem l'asem shemo sham. But in the place where God, the Lord your God, will choose from out of all your tribes to put His name there. So what does this mean? That we see they didn't know where the place was. Again, we're talking about Yerushalayim and the Temple Mount. It does not mention the place. The question is why. So different reasons are given. One reason given for this is jealousy and competition between the tribes. After all, which tribe would not want the temple in its portion? And also that the nations of the world might, once they know where it is, might either destroy or defile the area, or mount a war to conquer it, that the Jews couldn't have it. Also, this allows the Kohen to erase the name of God with the water of the sota. Again, but that's only in the temple. Again, with or a woman was accused of infidelity by her husband, she could bring her to the temple, and then she would drink what was called the mei sota, the water of the sota. And in the water it was plain water from the temple, dust from the floor of the temple, and they would take parchment and write the holy name of God on it and erase that name in the water, something again is forbidden. We see how much God thinks about marriage. We call marriage kedushin, something that's sanctified. That God is even willing to erase His name, a Torah prohibition, to keep shalom bayis, to keep peace in the house between husband and wife. And it says that it's not a place chosen by man because of its beauty or its location. Only God can know that place on earth, which has the greatest amount of spirituality. In fact, this is why the Yerushalayim doesn't have hot springs like Tiberia, nor is it known for its sweet fruits like the fruits of Genozer. The nation of Israel who came to Yerushalayim came only for God. There were no ulterior motives based on His name of the Torah. Now, the Temple Mount, this is Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah. It was well known amongst the nations, for there had been a tradition as to its holiness even before the Temple Mount was the temple was put on it. Also, the Jews in the desert had received their tradition from the forefathers because it was the site, again, of Akedas Yitzchak, of Avraham Avinu bringing up Yitzchak as a sacrifice before God. And it says, Mikol Shiftechem, from all of your tribes. It really wasn't from all the tribes. We know that the temple was basically in the portion of two tribes, tribe of Yehuda, and most of the temple was in Yehuda, and the Holy of Holies was in the portion of Binyamin that bordered each other. So how can we say it's from all the tribes? Mikol. The answer given is that with David HaMelech, there was a treaty for Aaron the Yevusi that they did not take his threshing floor, so to speak. So David bought it from him and collected 50 shekel from each of the tribes. So he gave him 600. And again, so therefore all of the tribes owned an equal portion, so to speak, in this land that had not been conquered. And again, was not ownerless, it was owned by Aaron Yevusi. And it says, Lasam Shmo Sham, to put his name there. The Shikno, to dwell, Tidrishu Uvasashamar. For his habitation you shall seek, and that's where you shall come. Now the Shikno, Rashi tells us, what is this referring to? This refers to Shiloh. Again, we know that the word it says Shema. If you look at the word Shema, move the letters around, it spells the word Moshe. Now the word Shiloh, which is where that stood for 369 years when the Jews entered the land, they put the tabernacle at Shiloh. That Shiloh has a numerical value of 345, as does the name Moshe. That the Mishkan took over where Moshe Rabbeinu left off and bringing the nation closer to God. Not only that, we know that in the Mishkan at Shiloh, the roof was made out of the hides that were in the tabernacle in the desert, the portable tabernacle, and all of the vessels, the menorah, the altar, and all of those were used again in the Mishkan at Shiloh. So again, Moshe was one who was given credit for the building of it. So therefore, Moshe was very much a part of Shiloh, and therefore the numerical value of being the same. Now, it says, Sidrishu of us, search and come there. So it's an allusion to the fact that if you seek God, He will help you. He will help you find Him. Again, it says in the Torah, and the way that a person wants to go, the Torah leads him. And also that we know that non-Jews, Goyim, carried their idols with them, and a Jew has to go to the temple to serve God and bring his sacrifices there. Again, this is alluded to in this commandment, that we don't serve God anywhere as far as, again, sacrificing and the rituals that we do. In addition, why is this singular when the whole portion has been said in the plural? The answer given because the whole concept of the nation of Israel coming to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, was to unite them as one nation serving one God, even though the rest of the year they lived apart. So it's kind of like a family gathering. where people would catch up on all that they had missed during the year. Also, singular means you must seek out through the instruction of a Navi, of a prophet, on which site the temple is to be built. And also today the Mizbeach has to be in the exact spot which only a Navi can tell us. Again, there are always conversations about rebuilding the temple. Problem is, unless we know exactly where the site of the altar is supposed to be, we can't build the temple. So therefore we don't have a prophet to tell us. This is the reason why we have not tried to rebuild the third temple. And it continues, and it says in verse number 6, V'havesem shama, and you shall bring it there, olei sechem, zivchem, vesmash v'sechem, ves trumas yetchem, v'nidrechem, v'vosechem, v'koris karnechem, v'sanchem. These are all the gifts that a person would bring, again, to the temple. Burnt offerings, sacrifices, tithings, again, their offering of your hand, the truma was given to a Kohen, your vows, your free will offerings, and again, Meiser Peterechem, the first of your animals, the firstborn, and again, and of your sheep. Now, Rashi here tells us, it was Zivchehem, again, your sacrifices, that is your peace offerings, again, which are obligatory. Meiser Sechem, your tithing, are the tithing of cattle, and the second tithing, which went to Jerusalem, also that of Meiser Ani, that went to people. Also, all Meiser Sheni, the second tithing, could only be eaten within the walls of Jerusalem. This really set up a kollel system, a system of people learning and living in Jerusalem, because there's no way a person in those times that they were in Jerusalem could eat up. You could only use that money of Meiser Sheni, of the second tithing, which was 10% of the produce of your fields. You could only eat it for food and use it for food in Jerusalem. So that limited what it could be done with. Therefore, people would leave relatives in Jerusalem to live off this money. And again, this started what we call a kollel system, where people would learn year-round in Jerusalem. Rashi continues and says, again, Bikurim are the first fruits we do on Shavuos. And also it says, and the priest shall take the basket out of your hand, again, which is what the priest does when you bring the first fruits. And then the first thing of your herd, you give them to the priest, and he will offer them there, which is called Peter Rechem, that which the first animal of birth, which opens the womb. Peter Rechem, again, is only with a natural birth. And just like we don't do Pidyon Haben if a child is born through a cesarean, it has to be through a natural birth, and then we do Pidyon Haben, we use the term our firstborn son. Now this may be an allusion to the fact that the farmer separates the truma. Again, truma was the first of the tithing, and that was given to the priests. There's no amount mentioned in the Torah. The rabbis told us you should be a person who was a bit stingy would give 1.5%. A person who was middle of the road would give 2%. A person who was trying to be very magnanimous in his service of God would give 2.5%. Now, the Ramban explains, Nachmanides, that the term Trumas Yedechem, the Truma of your hand, is an allusion to the generosity, Yedchem, hand, of the donor. Since the Torah did not specify how much of the harvest had to be reserved for the Kohen as this gift of the priest, this Truma, based on a tour. Now the Rambam also states that in the second temple, instead of each farmer giving his Truma and Maestros to the Kohanim, the priest, and the Levites, they instituted all of the tithing be brought to the temple and distributed there to the priests. So we see that it was praiseworthy to bring one's tithing to the temple based on the Ramban. And it continues in verse number 7, and it says, "V'yachaltem sham l'fnei Hashem Elokechem," and you shall eat it there before the Lord your God. Not only eat it there, "Usmachtem b'chol mishlach yetchem," and you shall have and rejoice with all that God has put into your hands. Again, so one of the mitzvahs that we have, amazingly, is joy, laughter, being happy, seeing benefits in all that we do in our lives by serving God. Now, when it talks about B'chol Mishlach Yodechem, you take the last letter of these three words, spells the word lechem, bread, that you should stretch out your hand to the poor person to give him bread. In fact, there is a thing, Li Lishmi, it says that you should do it for my name. So we know the Yud Kei Vav Kei is a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. So the way the commentaries tell us, the Yud is the hand of the donor reaching out, and the Hey is his 5 fingers, again, stretching. The Vav is the hand of the poor man, extending and again taking from him. If we give first, if we are the one who extends our hand, then it's the Yud Kei Vav Kei. If the per person has to come to us, it does not spell out God's name. So this becomes the idea that we need to be proactive. It's not easy for a person to ask for charity. We need to make it as comfortable for the person as possible. We need to anticipate his needs if at all possible. And it says, Atem uvatechem, you and your family. First, one more thing. It says the works of your hands. Refers to the ability to play melodies on musical instruments in order to bring oneself to the state of joy. Joy is a prerequisite to receive prophecy based from Nachman, that a prophet had to put himself in an elevated state. And this was done through music. Also, one of the services of the Levites, the Levium, in the temple was to sing and play instruments while the Kohanim brought up the sacrifices based on Vish Mordechai. Again, today we do not do that. The Christians have taken over many of our services. Again, to not imitate them. Again, you do not see it going on unless it's a Reformed temple. And even then, people find it strange. But again, there is a beauty, and this is the reason why there are halachas, there are laws about being in a church and being in a service. Asher Barach Hashem Elokecha, which the Lord your God has blessed you. Again, the blessing is all blessings. We need to know, the Shach says, comes from God Almighty. And again, Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God, whether He does it with mercy or with severity, it's always out of love. Again, one of the problems we today with parenting. Sometimes parents are so busy trying to be friends with their children, they forget to be parents. Wow, we've run kind of late, so I only want to do a half hour, we're a little past that. So I'm going to stop here at the end of verse number 7. God willing, we'll continue next week. Again, let me wish you good health, happiness, and joy to you and your family, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Again, thank you for listening. God bless.